I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Franco Berruti. Dr. Berruti is a professor of chemical engineering and the director of the Institute for Chemicals and Fuels from Alternative Sources, also known as ICFAR. Researchers at the University of Western Ontario ICFAR laboratory use scientific knowledge, skilled personnel, innovative and practical solutions to safely transform biomass, organic residues, co-products, and wastes into value-added products that can be commercialized for environmental and economic benefit. Good morning, Dr. Berruti, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much to OFA for the invitation to be part of this Research Day event. I'm excited to be here and to be the first presenter today. What I want to do is to give you a bit of an overview about the research activities that we are pursuing at Western University. So I'm the holder of an NSERC Industrial Research Chair. This program is co-funded by 50% by industry partners and 50% by the federal government. It is a program that is running, it has been running from 2018, and it is a 5-year program. What you see in the picture is ICFAR, is the Institute for Chemicals and Fuels from Alternative Resources, of which I'm the director. This institute is a very unique place. It is not on the university campus, but it is actually in the countryside in Ilderton. We created this institute as a result of special funding that came from the Ontario government with the purpose of creating an interface between university research and industry interests. As a result, we have a facility that allows us to have pilot plants and equipment that is of a scale that is larger than what you typically see in a university lab. And the purpose is, in fact, to do research that is more applicable and more relevant to our industry partnership. So why did we create a chair in thermochemical conversion of biomass and waste to bioindustrial resources? Well, the reason is very clear. The make, use, dispose practice is no longer acceptable, and what we want is to foster a circular economy, which is to we want to foster a circular economy, which is basically we want to consider any biomass and residues and waste not as a waste but as a resource. We want to maximize the value and eliminate the concept of waste. The thermochemical conversion of biomass and waste to bioindustrial resources chair has a specific objective, and I want to highlight the keywords that we have there because they are important, being the key points that have been inspiring our research. First of all, we want to develop scientific knowledge and personnel that is skilled in developing innovative and practical solutions for the transformation of biomass, residues, co-products, and waste, using a variety of different processes and technologies that would be the most appropriate to give the highest value products. But how do we define high value products? We define them as products that somebody will want. So products that can be commercialized and products that will have two benefits. One is economical benefit, but also environmental benefit. So that's the inspiration to our research. In order to pursue this research, I decided that just focusing on feedstocks or focusing on conversion technologies or products was not enough. What we had to do is to connect these three key elements of the value chain. So we basically decided to approach industry partners that would have interest in all these three sectors and develop a little bit of a brokerage among them so that we could maximize the synergy and develop basically ideas for projects that would address their respective interests by connecting the three elements and making the value chain flow. So as a result of this, we have identified a number of different feedstocks, and here we have listed them in this slide. These are the feedstocks that are of interest to our industry partners. We have identified a number of thermochemical technologies that we could consider to deal with those feedstocks to produce products, and the products can be in a liquid form, in the solid form, or in the gas form. And we are not just talking about biofuels, as people would immediately think about, but we are talking about things that would have higher value than fuels. We're talking about chemical value. So let's look at the partners that we have. And you see here, OFA is shown right in the middle. We have organizations like the Grain Farmers of Ontario. We have the greenhouse vegetable growers. But then we have startup companies like GWPT is the Global Warming Prevention Technologies, or companies that are becoming quite established like Circular Systems. And Chart Technologies is also a company that is establishing in Ontario as very prominent in the business of biochar. So we have a number of organizations that represent the three key pillars of that value chain. So let me show you some of our reactor technologies. We have a lot of expertise in pyrolysis. I've been working in this field for over 35 years, and we have developed interesting technologies that have gone to the point of being actually licensed to companies. Our first licensing success was a mobile pyrolysis technology that we licensed actually in China a few years back. More recently, we licensed another technology, which we call the mechanically fluidized reactor, to a startup company called BiotechFar. The facilities, the pictures that you see in the middle and on the left are pilot plants that we have in our institute. Those that we have that you have on the right is they belong to our industry partners, and as a matter of fact, the one on the bottom is also located at our institute, being a gasifier, whereas the one at the top on the right-hand side is a very large-scale biochar production facility. At the Institute, not only we have reactor conversion technologies, but we have very good analytical facilities to characterize our products and identify whether they do indeed have those characteristics that we want them to have to be able to be commercialized and to have organizations interested in purchasing that. So let's go back to the scheme of the three pillars, the feedstocks and the conversion technologies and the products. And OFA being a member of the consortium of the Industrial Research Chair, we had a lot of discussions. We have been interacting with Ian quite a bit. And over time, we have identified specific areas of interest that are that were kind of the priorities for OFA. This doesn't mean that this is cast in stone, and priorities can keep changing, and we can expand the areas of opportunities for research cooperation that would be of interest to your organization. So let me just give you a snapshot of what pyrolysis is, in case you don't know what it is. Pyrolysis is a process that allows the conversion of biomass residues and waste organic materials with devices that would allow a good transfer of heat and mixing but in the absence of oxygen. So there is no combustion. There is thermal cracking of the molecules in the absence of oxygen, generating vapors, which could, upon cooling, would condense, and those would be what we call bio-oil, generating permanent gases. Those we call them gas, and then generating solid residues, which we call biochar. The idea behind our program is to get value from all the three streams that we are generating, all the three co-products. The gas typically is something that could not really be transported very easily, so it is typically used as an energy recovery for the process itself, since the process requires heat for the thermal cracking. The liquid is typically produced with yields ranging between 40 and 70% of the original feedstock. And the liquid is very interesting. A lot of interest in the past was focusing on making fuels out of these bio-oils. But as I said, our interest at our institute is to look at even potentially higher value than fuel, which is chemical value. And maybe the extraction of the separation of substances that would have pharmaceutical value, pesticidal value, flavoring agents, maybe fine chemicals, and so forth. The biochar being produced in pyrolysis is typically produced with yields ranging between 20 and 40%. Originally, in maybe 25, 30 years ago, we were trying to maximize the bio-oil with the objective of creating fuels. In these days, we are looking at biochar actually as a tremendous opportunity, because studies and history have shown that biochar can have a wide variety of applications, ranging from soil amendment, fertilizer value, but also very, very topical in these days is the carbon sequestration opportunity that we can have utilizing biochar. Biochar is a carbon structure that is porous, and it has also very strong adsorption properties. So biochar can be used in place of activated carbon, and therefore very high value material. So when we talk about biochar, let me just summarize. Potential applications could be fertilizer, carbon sequestration, coke for metallurgical applications. We can certainly burn it as coal or like barbecue type of fuel. As I said, because of the porosity and the functionality of the surfaces of the biochar, we can have very good adsorption properties. Because of the mineral content of the biochar, which is basically coming from the biomass that is utilized to produce it, we can actually utilize the biochar as a catalyst for chemical reactions. But more and more studies are showing benefits of biochar as a food and feed additive, or even an additive for cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. Now, biochar can be produced by slow pyrolysis at low temperature, and that is called torrefaction. Pyrolysis processes that are going through slow, intermediate, or fast pyrolysis, or even through gasification. This picture shows some of the visible benefits of biochar that have been demonstrated in a variety of studies and applications when biochar is incorporated in soil. Among the benefits of biochar, there are benefits that are kind of clearly visible, but other that are under investigation. Carbon capture is one of the, as I said, topical interest in these days. Biochar introduced in the soil reduces nitrous oxide emissions. Again, value for greenhouse gas emission reduction mitigation. It reduces methane soil emissions. it is a carbon negative energy form, because we generate also gases and bio-oils that can be used as fuel. Biochar can be used as adsorbent for odors. When introduced in the soil, it has moisture retention properties. It leaches out slowly the minerals, providing improved soil fertility. It is increasing the carbon content of the soil, and also retaining some of the nutrients and minimizing the runoff. I just want to give you an example that can be interesting to look at. If you take 1 ton of corn stover and you convert it through pyrolysis, you may be able to generate, say, 35% yield, so 0.35 tons of biochar. Biochar can, depending on how it is produced, it can contain a very large content of very stable carbon. And so 1 ton of corn stover would contain roughly 0.26 tons of stable carbon. And 0.26 tons of stable carbon correspond to about 1 ton of CO2 that is removed from circulation. So if you want, equivalent to 1 greenhouse gas offset credit. So this is important to consider, because biochar can indeed become one of the very effective and economically attractive ways of sequestering carbon in the soil in a very stable form that could stay there for, in fact, millennia. Let me tell you a little bit more on biochar from greenhouse gas reduction. Besides sequestering carbon in the biochar in the soil, we can displace fossil fuel energy by producing gas and bio-oil through the process. We can divert waste from generating methane rather than decomposing and generating greenhouse gas such as methane. The carbon structure of the original biomass residue is locked down in a stable carbon. And as I said, the reduction of the nitrous oxide emissions and also of CO2 emissions during fertilizer manufacturing and applications, because of the reduction of the need for fertilizer when it's applied. So lots of interesting opportunities that would apply to the agricultural sector. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the projects that we are doing. And I selected, I believe, 3 projects just to give you an idea. I shift from biomass now to plastic waste. The agricultural sector generates quite a bit of waste. I have to give credit here to my students, Anastasia, Steve, Maddalena, and others. We have international relations that are part of this project. As I said, the agricultural sector uses plastics, bale wrappings, containers for fertilizers, pesticides, and so forth. We are looking at how to get rid of this liability in a sustainable manner. And so the objectives of our research is to see whether we can effectively and efficiently thermally decompose the plastics that are contaminated, maybe mixed plastics that have that are really difficult to recycle using conventional recycling systems, into an oil that could be used as a fuel, but even better, that could be used as a precursor for making the original monomers that made the plastics. So we have divided our research into 2 parts. One is looking at the thermal decomposition of the mixed plastics and contaminated plastics into liquids, and then a phase 2 where we do a secondary cracking of these liquids, attempting to break down the chemicals into the original monomers that could be used to make plastics again fostering what we see the aim is a circular economy. Our reactor system is one of the pictures that I've shown before. We have reactor systems that are small, medium size. The one that we're using for plastics has a capacity of about 1 kilo per hour of ability to process the feedstock. So what have we done? We have been looking at virgin plastics just to start develop a baseline in our investigation. So we have taken high density polyethylene and low density polyethylene, and we have been doing the thermal cracking of the individual virgin plastics. Then we started creating blends to identify basically real situations where we are dealing with the mixed plastics. And the end result is that depending on the temperature of processing, we achieve different yields of liquids and gases. Interestingly, when we process plastics, we produce very little, in fact, negligible solid residue. So the gas yield increases with temperature, achieving, say, yields of about 80, 90% when we get to close to the gasification regime of 700 degrees, whereas correspondingly the liquid yield keeps decreasing. So depending on what we want to obtain, whether a gas or maximize the gas or the liquid, we can tailor the system by selecting the appropriate temperature. Now, what is in the gas? Well, in the gas we have the predominant gases are methane, hydrogen, and ethylene. Ethylene would be the precursor for making polyethylene. So it's the monomer that we would eventually aim at maximizing when we want to, again, break down the plastics to the virgin monomers to make new plastics again. So the idea is basically we start from polyethylene and polypropylene waste that may be all mixed together, contaminated in whatever form, and then produce different products, which can be liquids or gases. And I'm really focusing right now on the phase 1 of the project, where we are looking at the liquid also as potentially as a fuel. And so in terms of major findings of this project, highest liquid yields of the order of 65% are generated at temperatures around 550 degrees. The liquids, interestingly, have properties that are similar to diesel. And in fact, we have actually tested this liquid plastic oil in diesel engines, and they run properly. The heating value of the pyrolysis oil from plastics is of the order of 43 megajoules per kilo, which is essentially the same order of magnitude as diesel. Here you can see some tests that we did at ICFR recently of combustion of this. These are not even under optimized conditions, but we just wanted to visibly show how we could combust this liquid plastic oil in a stove. And actually, I don't know if I can show this video, but we have been actually burning the gas, and this is a funny test that we did, where we fill the bag of gas, and then we just made the fire and the demonstration of the combustion properties of that gas. We actually put the gas also into the engine of a forklift and made it run perfectly well. So what is the concept here? The concept is that if we are in a municipality that has a municipal sorting facility, many plastics can be recycled, but there are many plastics mixed and contaminated that cannot be recycled. So the idea is to convert those plastics into plastic oil rather than sending them to the landfill. Then the plastic oil can be transported to locations where they can be either refined as a fuel, but also cracked further to make the monomers and make polymers again. So kind of that is the concept that where the liquid plastic oil can serve as an intermediate, can be easily transported to the location where then the polymers can be produced again from the cracked product. Let's shift gear and let's go to a completely different project, which may be relevant to OFA, which is vomitoxin corn. We received samples of corn affected by DON, and we decided to look into ways of applying our thermochemical conversion process to get rid of the DON, but also to convert the material into something that would have value. So many of you would know that DON is a mycotoxin that is identified in Canada, Europe, especially some years are worse than others, but when the corn content of DON reaches certain levels, the corn is no longer usable. And there are obviously health and economic impacts of the DON contamination. So we have been looking at ways of getting rid of this liability. And yes, in the literature, there are examples of things that can be done, washing the corn, cooking it at low temperature, treating it with ozone. All these processes are not really very effective in eliminating completely the problem, and they are expensive at the same time and maybe not easily implementable. So the objectives of our research were to investigate the feasibility of using thermochemical pyrolysis for destroying DON in corn grains, and then utilize this unusable corn waste to produce value-added products like biochar, bio-oil, and gases. But then the key question is, what do we do with those three products? And the idea was, let's see what is the highest possible value of all these three products. So we did experimentation, pyrolysis, which is the thermal cracking in the absence of oxygen. We generated non-condensable gases that could be used for energy purposes. Bio-oil, the idea once we started analyzing it was really not to focus on bio-oil as a fuel source, but more like as a way of generating some chemicals. And the biochar from corn is very interesting. It can be activated. Basically, we can do post-processing to increase further the porosity. And the idea was to see whether we could use that biochar as an adsorbent. We used the batch reactor in the case of the corn. And here you see the pictures. It's a fairly large reactor where we can process about 3-4 kilos of corn and generate correspondingly the condensate, bio-oil, the gas, and the biochar residue. You see here the yields of the products. Increasing the temperature of processing, we keep increasing the bio-oil yield, the biochar yield correspondingly goes down, and the non-condensable gases within the temperature range that we tested is approximately constant. So let's say that we are operating at 600 degrees, we have about 30% biochar produced, 45% bio-oil, and about roughly 30% of gas. First result from this testing was that in fact the DON disappears. We have no DON left in the bio-oil or the biochar. So that's already one result. We have eliminated that problem. Now the bio-oil, what does it contain? Well, the bio-oil contains interesting chemicals like acetic acid and levoglucosan, which is a sugar. And so the idea is, can we extract the acetic acid? Can we extract the sugars? Or can we use them in combination? For example, acetic acid and sugars would be two nice feeds for an anaerobic digester which would allow to generate biogas from this bio-oil. So a variety of different opportunities for the chemicals. The gas contains primarily carbon monoxide, methane, some carbon dioxide, and some hydrogen. It has a reasonable heating value, similar to town gas, and therefore the potential application of the gas is really energy recovery. But let's focus a little bit more on the biochar. The biochar, again, produced about with a yield of 30%, could be activated, and you see the raw corn has very low porosity. You see the picture on the top. The raw corn is very smooth, has a very smooth surface and some pores that would allow the transfer of mass transfer. But once it becomes biochar, the porosity increases, and once you activate it further with a post-treatment treatment thermally, the porosity increases drastically. And say after 3 hours of activation, the porosity gets into values that are similar to commercial activated carbon. So what we did is we said, well, let's see how this biochar from corn performs as an adsorbent. So the classical test that we do, which gives a visible adsorption result, is removal of methylene blue from a solution. And our results are actually showing that activated corn biochar and commercial activated carbon adsorb methylene blue very, very similarly. The performance is really very, very similar. But then we got into more complicated pollutants, and the emerging contaminants that are in wastewater are typically pharmaceuticals, hormones. So we decided to take the challenge of looking at ibuprofen removal from wastewater. And what we saw is that actually in about 9 minutes, the activated biochar from corn reaches the same adsorption capacity as commercial activated carbon. So all of a sudden, this biochar acquires the value of similar to activated carbon, which is a very valuable chemical. So what are the major findings of this research? With thermochemical processing, we can effectively destroy DON. We show that we can achieve reasonable yields of the 3 products that are of interest, and we can tune them depending on the temperature of processing. We can see that acetic acid and levoglucosan are 2 primary products in the bio-oil, which may be interesting to take advantage of. We have seen that the biochar, when activated, performs similarly to commercial activated carbon, therefore gaining considerable value. And finally, the gas produced can be certainly used as a fuel because it has a heating value similar to town gas. And let me talk about maybe the last project that I wanted to talk about in my presentation today is the synergy between biochar and compost when they are introduced into the soil. And we had one of our postdoctoral fellows that has been working on this project. Because of COVID, we started the project late, and this is basically a initial experience for us. It's we have not really done much work in growing crops ourselves, and therefore it's our first experiment. But essentially what we did is we wanted to study the impact of biochar on oats growth and yields, and investigate the influence of compost when utilized together with the biochar or individually. The reason for this is that one of our partners in the industrial research chair is Try Recycling, and they have a considerable production of compost. So we wanted also to look at the rate of application and the ratio of biochar to compost on on the yield of oats plants. So what we did is we performed experiments by taking compost from dry recycling, biochar from char technologies, and the topsoil from our environmental field station here next to ICFAR. We have done analysis and characterization of all the different feedstocks, and we have performed a series of pot trials under controlled conditions by varying the rate of application, the biochar to compost ratio, and we examined the shoot length, the root length, and the plant yield. We performed the Latin square design, so different treatments and different replicates to have statistical significance of our results. And here you can see some of the pots at the beginning of the growth. You can see the little shoots coming out of the 72 pots that we have studied at the end of the summer. And here you can see the oats growing more after a couple of weeks. And the major findings are that there is indeed synergy between biochar and compost. And the synergy between the two improved the shoot length. And biochar and compost alone did not seem to impact the shoot length. Using compost alone enhanced the primary root length, but the best results in terms of plant yield, and we have enhancement in plant yield of about 35%, is when we used mixtures of 75% biochar and 25% of compost applied with a 15% rate of application. Now, these are initial results, and we need to obviously do much more to also be able to translate this into a field application. So let me just wrap up by saying that what I wanted to do today was to give you a bit of a high-level view of some of the activities that we are pursuing at ICFAR as part of the NSERC Industrial Research Chair. I want to give you a heads up on some of the new projects that we are pursuing. And at the moment, we have some contract research on sustainable carbon-based slow-release fertilizers, which may become of interest to OFA membership. And obviously, I'm always willing to listen to new ideas and directions. And our desire is really to be in a very dynamic conversation with our industry partners and keep manipulating and evolving our research so that would maximize their interest. I also want to say that besides being an NSERC Industrial Research Chair and doing contract research, I'm involved in a variety of other activities that may be relevant to OFA. In particular, I've recently joined as a member of the Bioenterprise Science and Innovation Advisory Committee. And in one of my interest in serving as a member of the Bioenterprise Science and Innovation Advisory Committee is to support the members of that organization and hopefully OFA members with our contributions of ideas and innovation to see whether we can make Ontario agriculture more competitive and really show leadership at the national and international scale. So with this, I just want to thank you for your attention, and I would love to be able to address any question that you may have, and I will see whether I can stop showing my screen, and I would like to see.
I think that's perfect, Dr. Berruti. Thank you very much. That is a fascinating presentation. And as a reminder to all our attendees, Please submit any questions you have for Dr. Berruti in the question box. And we do have a few minutes for question and answers right now. So as we're answering them, please feel free to add more questions as we come along. So my first question, and it's very topical to what you were just talking about at the end. One of our attendees he says, I am a private economic developer, and he has several industrial hemp cultivars that are seeking uses for the fiber they generate. He wants to know what suggestions do you have for him and his Canadian growers actively looking right now at locations in the United States where hemp growth is being promoted, for example, in South Carolina. Any suggestions that would help keep these investment dollars inside Canada? So are there special attributes of hemp that could make it worthwhile for a feedstock?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is actually quite interesting because we are actually doing work with hemp at the moment. One of the industry partners in our consortium of the NSERC Industrial Research Area is Circular Systems. This company is very much interested in the production of sustainable fibers, and hemp is one of the feedstocks that they are interested in. Now, when you produce the fibers, and hemp does generate really good quality fibers, there are other co-products that are separated when you have the screening of the fibers that are used for textiles and applications. And one of the projects that we are actually pursuing is to look at what can we do with the co-products to make to generate products of value that could be either used in the processing of the fibers, so that again we foster the circular economy and we can maybe produce chemicals that would allow us to improve the quality of the fibers. And I mentioned that some of the liquid products here contain acids. We have alkali components that are segregated in the biochar that we can leach out. And acids and alkali are chemicals that are used in the fiber processing. So the idea is to turn it around and to utilize the co-products of the pyrolysis as chemicals for improving the fiber processing. But at the same time, we produce gas that could be used for energy, or maybe biochar that once we leach out the alkali, we can use it as an adsorbent for other applications. So the objective is nothing goes to waste, and we get the maximum use of all the co-products. And hemp is one of those that we have targeted. And we are doing at the moment actually some interesting screening experiments where we are trying to scan what are the chemicals that we produce from hemp residues at different temperatures and with different type of processing, slow pyrolysis, fast pyrolysis. And our equipment allows us to do that, so that once we will have the scan done, we can identify the pathways for the low-hanging fruits. But certainly we want to see the hemp producers to keep the money in Canada, and there are opportunities for doing that.
So I think I will definitely put you in touch with Ross Deckley, who asked that question. I'm always fascinated that you end up having such synergies with the feedstock, what it's meant for, and then the co-products that are actually used in that stream as well. For example, with the textile. That's fascinating. We did have a question. I'll just answer generally that somebody was wondering, is the session being recorded? Yes. Robin says that my son will be very interested in this presentation. My own son is as well. So all the presentations are being recorded and will be available afterwards. We have time for a couple more questions, Doctor. Someone has asked here, can the plastics be used as a fuel energy source without any intervention? I think plastic is being used in a waste to heat plant in the Maritime somewhere. So there isn't much intervention you have to do in these cases, is there?
Well, okay, in the Maritimes is, yeah, I'm very familiar with that process because it is a pyrolysis process. Actually, I was involved in reviewing that process on behalf of the Ministry of the Environment of the province of Nova Scotia. It is in Nova Scotia, that process. And the process is exactly what we are talking about, which is basically a thermal cracking of mixed plastics with the objective of generating vapors, which upon condensation become a plastic oil, and gases. Yes, we can use those products, the liquid. We can use it as a diesel substitute, and we have shown that. I wouldn't use it in a diesel car, but I would use it in a maybe a diesel engine for marine applications or systems that are more forgiving, because as you know, the diesel that you put in your Mercedes Benz would contain a lot of additives, and over the years, the petroleum companies have made these fuels very sophisticated to minimize the emissions and maximize the performance. So I wouldn't put it directly into the fuel tank of a BMW, but I would. We have actually put it in a diesel engine of a Caterpillar and engine, and it has been performing extremely well, even in terms of emissions, because if we are not utilizing plastics that contain sulfur, for example, the diesel that we produce is actually sulfur free. If we don't have PVC in the plastic mix, we don't have any chlorine. So, I mean, we have the products can be quite clean, but the fuel value is too low. We are competing with the petroleum products, and oil. Even today, what is it, $60 some a barrel? If you make ethylene or propylene out of your plastic waste, you get to a much higher value, and you're fostering the circular economy, which is also creating that loop of eliminating completely waste and giving again feedstock to the petrochemical company that is not petroleum based, or that is basically recycled as originally petroleum based. So one has to look at the value. The potential is there.
Stopping them from removing it from the earth, for sure.
Anyways, that's the there are other processes in Europe and United States that are aiming at the transformation of plastic mixes into liquids, and but we are aiming higher to going all the way to monomers.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. There's quite a few coming in, so I'll just remind everybody that we will address all the questions, and we'll either get back to everyone as a whole or individually. But one of the questions that came in was that you mentioned biochar permanently sequesters carbon in the soil, and it also sequesters the carbon from the original feedstock. Can that biochar sequester other chemicals you want to keep from leaching out of the soil? So I guess if you put it on the soil on the farm, can we tailor it to take out another chemical?
Yes, in fact, this is why we are studying so much the adsorption properties of biochars, because once they are introduced in the soil, they have biochar has the ability to absorb some of the maybe some of the fertilizers that otherwise will leach out, like phosphorus, for example. Phosphates are typically leaching very easily with water, and the biochar has the ability to retain it and to release it more slowly. So there are those type of advantages. one of the interesting things is that biochar can be used multiple times. One of the fundamental thinking that we have is, imagine you are treating some water that has very high phosphate concentration, and you are absorbing the phosphate with the biochar. Then you take the biochar, you put it in the soil, and then all of a sudden it becomes a fertilizer, and it will leach out the phosphate very slowly. Or you're using the biochar as an adsorbent for H2S from flue gases, and you are loading the biochar with sulfur components. Then you can take the biochar and put it in the soil, and it will bring sulfur to the soil. So you can
And
have
you can
multiple
control that.
sequential uses of the biochar and maybe get the value for it 3 times.
I'm always amazed that all these things can happen. There's a couple more questions that I think will be pretty straightforward to answer. One is, are you working with any chemical companies in the Sarnia-Lambton area, for example, Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, BIC?
Yes,
Do you have
we
relationships with those companies?
we are interacting extensively with BIC, and we have considerable interactions with companies that are also outside of the industrial research air program that are present in Sarnia, but they are maybe also present in other parts of Canada. So yes, we are working extensively also at the international level. We are working with companies in Europe, especially Denmark at the moment, and with United States and others. I mean, we are really networking very extensively also with our colleagues, researchers all around the world. So we are very, very much connected.
Well, it's definitely a time for the environment that this is a big issue everywhere in the world. So that's fantastic news. Couple more questions. One is somebody has written in, thank you, Franco, for the leadership in this research area and for the very good presentation. I wonder how feedstock sources, conventional plastics versus agricultural biomass, affect the quality of the bio oil. So is there any difference in the feedstock of one type of plastic to another?
Yeah, there are
Maybe dirt in
differences. Yeah, from one type of plastic to another, there are differences. The presence of dirt and contaminants also create a difference because some of the contaminants, for example, can act as a catalyst. So the good thing about pyrolysis is that it's very forgiving. I mean, we are beating up those molecules quite hard, and we are fragmenting them in a way that once you have the fragments, many fragments are basically very similar, whether they come from a biomass or whether they are coming from a plastic. They are radicals. They are pieces of radical that then interact with each other. So you can actually do co-processing of biomass and plastics, which we do, and we get them to become a different thing, which is integrating the two. We are doing even more beating when we do gasification, because when you gasify any feedstock and you get to carbon monoxide and hydrogen, you have gone to the very, very basic building blocks of the molecules. So you have cracked them to the extreme, and then you can rebuild the molecules. With carbon monoxide and hydrogen and the presence of catalyst, you can rebuild the molecules. So you can actually do, in science, we have been able to demonstrate that we can do basically anything we want. The key is the cost. So you can take manure and make vitamins out of it, okay? But you can do it, but the cost may be prohibitive. So we need to learn how to couple the pathways of feasibility with the economical drivers. And that's what we are trying to maximize. That's why in the objectives of the chair program, at the very end, there is that statement that is we are talking about bioindustrial products, products that can be commercialized, that somebody will want to buy.
I'm just going to give you one last question, Doctor. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm going to combine two. We have one attendee ask, is there any consideration being given to use biochar for poultry bedding, or is it too coarse? And then the follow-up to that is someone asked, or can biochar be pelletized? I'm not sure if you want to do those together, or is it the same?
The answer is yes. Biochar can, we are investigating ourselves in collaboration with our colleagues all around the world, the applications of biochar for odor control, for absorption of chemicals that can be generated by animals. One of our recent experiments is we are cleaning fish waste, the waste generated by a fish in a recirculating aquaculture system with biochar. So we are absorbing these nutrients, and then we can use the biochar as a fertilizer. And yes, we can use it as in combination with, for odor control, for absorption, and so forth. And the answer is yes, it can be pelletized. And we have done quite a bit of work on the pelletization of biochars using binders that are sustainable. Again, we can actually pelletize biochar using the bio oil that we produce. So we don't even have to use other ingredients, but we can pelletize biochar using conventional binders like cornstarch, for example, and you can make pellets that are really strong. So the answer is yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, so we are at 10:30 now. That timing was perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Berruti. That's all the time we have for the questions today. We appreciate so much you joining us and sharing this project. It's so fascinating. And again, as questions come in, we will ensure that Dr. Berruti gets an opportunity to respond to the questions, and we'll share all that information later. Thank you once again, Dr. Berruti. That's very fascinating work.